Welcome. I'm Janice Ellig, CEO of the Ellig Group, and welcome to the Ellig Webinar Series. We are delighted to have today a special guest who was on in March during the pandemic, and she's back again with us today. All of our webinars and podcasts can be seen on our website, and I invite you to go and listen to the extraordinary leaders and speakers that we have had in the past, and we'll have others coming forward also to bring insights to help us navigate through COVID-19 and into the new reality, whatever that is going to look like. And I'm delighted to welcome Lili Gil Valetta, who is the co-founder and CEO of Culturintel. And Lili was here, as I said, in March to talk about a subject at that time, which was about what leaders can learn from over 100 million digital conversations. And her company, Culturintel, is one that will harvest all those 100 million conversations about what people were saying in March about the impact of COVID-19 on their economic, their behavioral, their social, and their psychological impact that it was having on them. And then what we as leaders of our employees and consumers could do in terms of understanding that impact. So today we're going to talk about the impact and what is shifting in terms of people's minds, in terms of their banking and their financial relationships and what is really important to them. And as we did in March, we talked about this in terms of gender and one's ethnic backgrounds and generational, and what is that impact on everybody today. And Lili Gil Valetta is just one of those really renowned, intelligent experts, and she's part of the World Economic Forum, the young leaders there, and an award-winning entrepreneur after having spent 10 years at J&J. And I'm really proud that we are also strategic partners with Lili and her firm, Culturintel. So more to be said today, Lili, about the surveys that you're doing, right, and what you're learning. And so I'm so delighted to have you back again. And I know we're going to be talking about this subject going forward in other areas about the impact of this pandemic and the new realities. So why don't we start a little bit with so the audience knows about your methodology in your company and how you gather all this data that's so important, because as we're making decisions, we cannot make these decisions without having the data that we then turn into information, right?
That is correct. And thank you so much for having me, Janice, again. For those of you that were here before, thank you for coming back. So yes, let me just give you a quick sweep at how Culturintel works, which is short for cultural intelligence. We are basically tapping into the voice of the people, because everyone with a cell phone or a digital device these days is volunteering a comment or a discussion almost anywhere there is a comment box. So our tech is able to scrape and mine every open source digital discussion. It looks at the patterns in the language using natural language processing and artificial intelligence, because those patterns gives us clues about sentiment, topics, drivers, and barriers to behaviors, to mindsets. And the magic of it is we're getting all of this without ever asking a question, doing a survey, a poll, or a focus group. And of course, because we're all about cultural intelligence, always the data has an inclusive lens, which means what we always report is a portrait of, as I like to call it, the new America, through the lens of gender, ethnicity, and generation, so that we can see with the power of numbers, how are those mindsets different across different segments so that we can be relevant as business leaders. So with that, Janice, we know the world has really changed for a lot of people in the middle of this pandemic, right? I don't know if you want to build something here. It's the news are everywhere, right, of the economic impact.
We've known, the growth worldwide has sort of stagnated, but this economic downturn, so we have a pandemic, an economic downturn, and now we have some social justice issues we're dealing with, right? So that's going to be another topic that you and I are going to cover. Yeah. But let's talk about the struggling in the crisis and what this means to people today, because it's really eye-opening in terms of what we need to do for our employees and our consumers.
Exactly. So here's the thing. Even though it feels like everything is COVID, there was life before COVID, or as I call it, BC. So before we can even get a peek into the future, or what's going to happen, or the new normal, as some people call it, I wanted to give you three compelling facts that hopefully are going to give you a context of where we were even before COVID hit. The first thing, which ironically a lot of people don't even realize, is that we're fast approaching a majority minority status as a nation. What does that mean? Actually, by the year 2040, we are estimated to be already majority minority, but the population under 15 today in America, our youngest citizens, are already majority minority, which means for those of us in business or anyone in finances, you know you want to bet on growth. You want to anticipate consumer needs. This is where growth is coming from. 100% of population growth comes from diverse segments. Now, here's where you add another layer. Before COVID, those segments that are driving all the growth in population in this country, and also the very important women's segment, was already more worried about their finances. This was the percentage that were worried before COVID even happened. So you see that there was already a dialed up concern or less optimism about where you were looking into the future of your money or your wallet. And these segments are as well earn less and we're saving less. Let me put this in context again, Janice. We're talking about the segments that are the future of America's workforce and entrepreneurship and leaders. And the median value of family net worth, as you see by ethnicity on the left-hand side, was very disparate, big gaps before COVID. And also amongst us women, professional women like you and I often are retiring with 42% less funds than our male counterparts. So, and then all of this happened, right? And that's why we went into the power of big data. What does that tell us about how the mindset and the psyche of people are shifting? Because the world is not the same as we knew it. Keep in mind, that was the context of where we were coming from. Now, here is some of the latest numbers, and they keep getting updated. So the most recent from April, the share of adults, as you see on the left-hand side, that report having, lost either jobs or work hours or work-related income during the pandemic. And look at the disparities also, the disproportionate numbers across segments, particularly within the Hispanic, which, by the way, is contributing to half of our population growth. And then you look on the right-hand side and also how in the middle of all of that, obviously what happens is you're drawing from the little bit of savings that you had. If you remember on that net worth slide, that was already very little to begin with. So whatever you had left or the credit cards that you have, you're maxing them out because we are in the middle of this pandemic. So even with all the stimulus, even with reopening the economy and getting back into work, there was these 2-3 months of a gap that means a lot of money for a lot of families. So what does this mean, right? 8 million data points of analysis before COVID and 3.6 million data points that we analyzed from March 15 onwards gives us clues into the psyche and how all of you, I'm not sure who's watching, but whether you're a corporate executive, an HR or talent leader, or a business owner, or just somebody that cares about the future of our economy, this matters because unless we tackle the mental barriers of people's relationship or healthy or not relationship to their finances, is going to impact all of our economy, especially if these are the growth segments. So here's where we're gonna get started. Big aha number one, which is fascinating. The way our tech works picks up the patterns in the way people speak, and these segments organically were revealed. What does this mean? That when people were talking about the state of their finances and relationship to banking institutions, 39% of them before COVID referred to it as, this is an important, protective measure I gotta take, right? It's about conserving what I have. It's about having a reliable banking partner. It's about security and kind of protecting my nest egg. Then you see the others, 24% were more functional, some relating to financial institutions or experts for convenience, service, simplicity, make it clear, do your job, and that's it. 21%, this was before COVID, were about optimism, Let me plan for the future. I want to grow. I'm going to plan ahead. I'm going to look for opportunities. And then 16% were just problem solving. Make this easy so you're solving what is not working for me. And this was before COVID. So if that was the mental profile, so think about this as a snapshot of America overall, of their relationship to banking institutions and financial transactions. How has that changed during COVID? And here it is. The protective instinct kicked in from 39% to 47%. But you know what's the most concerning to me, Janice? Look at that blue, light blue sliver.
Build.
It is shrinking by 3x. That means the little bit that we had of people's optimism, which as we know moves markets, right? And building towards the future has reduced, but the protective instinct kicked in. This is the big snapshot.
Yeah, so let me, I would also say to our audience, if we went back to your March presentation with your slides then, and you talked about the psychological, social, behavioral impact, putting economic aside, it was really very telling that people were feeling not optimistic, particularly the non-white group, right? They were not optimistic. They have felt a lack of purpose. They were feeling sort of adrift, and they were really not very positive about the future. So this is kicking in even more so now with regard to their finances. That's all the psychological of 100 million digital discussions that you picked up.
Exactly. And the 100 hyper-focused on finances gives us this 12 million roughly when you look at pre and during. And it's a very rich data set, right? Now, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and this is why we call this cultural intelligence. We cannot be inclusive in our approach to, let's say, helping in people's finances or relationship building with customers unless we know this kind of stuff. So here's what's happening. If you see the left-hand side is the pre-COVID numbers by ethnicity versus the overall, and then the during. What are we seeing here? Very quick eye check, that dark blue portion of the bar, which is the basic instinct of protecting whatever you may have, has gone up. But look at the African American gray portion of it, function. That means help me solve, help me with the service, be there in a simple and convenient way for me. Some of that expectation on service and convenience went up for the African American segment, more so than others. And also the orange portion that is highlighted for African American is specific to solving, which means that we're looking or are looking for a partner or a financial expert or institution to help them navigate through these difficult times. Looking for solutions is more pronounced than for other segments. So one size doesn't fit all when it comes to the ethnic breakout of this mindset.
It's interesting, Lili, the business leaders out there in financial services, in banking, the financial advisors, this is very telling. People really want help. They want service. They want advice. They don't know what to do, right? And their income levels and their retirement levels that they're going to have are low. They're really looking, they're almost desperate for help.
Exactly. And, projecting a bit here, because I am a fellow Latina, right? We are known as a community to be fairly optimistic. Glass half full, there's never a dull moment. You make everything into a party, which was being manifested in our relationship to financial institutions before COVID at 27%. Actually, one of the highest numbers across all segments. That has almost disappeared, which pains me when you look at the post-COVID picture compared to the overall. But I want to make sure that also people realize that the overall, which is basically everybody, all of the end values combined, are showing that increase in function, which means make it simple, make it work, make it easy, which has some implications for customer service, and get the, all the bells and whistles out. Don't distract me with fancy marketing, just make it work. And there's a lot of that pragmatism that is kicking in. Now, gender, I love this one because we're always wondering how are we women maybe a little bit different when it comes to the monies. Already we were saving less and retiring with less money, right? What is this doing to the state of our mindset in relation to finances? Once again, and this is what pains me the most because we know markets move with consumer, confidence and optimism. That light blue in the middle, whoop, has shrunk all across, almost disappeared for our women's segment, which is very concerning. And yes, that protective mindset, not to be stereotypical, but yes, that kind of like mama bear instinct, I know it's kicked in for me and my own family, kicks in a bigger way of wanting to protect whatever we have, very short-sighted, focused on the now, almost none in the forward-thinking future. So here's what matters. For those of you in the call here that may be from, wealth management, financial institutions, if the women's segment was already a priority key segment to help navigate with wealth management and retirement and annuities and things like that, now that heavy lift is even heavier because of the current context and the mindset that we see here that has almost disappeared in the building, forward thinking, optimistic category. So that is very telling and different from our male counterparts, right? Any thoughts there, Janice? What's your reaction to this?
Well, I'm very surprised that the build is so low, right? But the service piece is still, it's crying out to help me make it simple, and show me. And I think we're going to see this in the other slides as well, Lili. So women want to have advisors and advice from people that look like them. And I think, in the African American community and the Hispanic community, I think business leaders have to know that they, as from a search perspective, I'm putting in women and underrepresented groups. I think the underrepresented groups want to see somebody who's been successful, say as a financial advisor, who can help them think through their financial issues. So, here's somebody who's Latino who has made it. Don't have those finances, but you're helping me because you understand my background to some degree. You understand where I come from. So I think it's very important for companies, again, as we look at the composition of our workforce, to have people in the workforce that reflect the communities that we are serving. Because when you're talking to a woman or you're talking to an African American, you have to be able to have some empathy, caring, have maybe not totally walked in their shoes, but be able to understand a little bit more about what they're saying as opposed to being the Caucasian white male, right?
Correct. And this is not about, I know we're in the season of protest and there will be another webinar about that.
We're going to do that.
But it's not just about the altruism of what that means and we got to say the right things in this season. I just showed you that chart at the beginning of this presentation. The growth in this country, which means customers, shoppers, new business creators, new workforce, is all coming from diverse segments. So unless we have an inclusive approach to understanding these mindsets, we may be leaving out of our plans and our strategies how to be relevant, or in this case, continue to move forward our economy with those that may need it most and are also driving all the growth. So this is a very important, framework for us to maybe retrain the way we look at business. Right. And last but not least, which this one to me was fascinating and shocking in a way, the younger segments of our population, the millennials and even the Gen Zs, are showing also, look at the Gen Zs. There's so much data about Gen Zs in a way behaving the way boomers behaved in their younger years. So go and dig it out. It's fascinating, kind of sociological comparison out there. For some reason, so millennials, I'm not a millennial, but millennials get a lot of you're still living with your parents, you want everything so easy. And somehow this younger generation is very in tune with the world's issues. They want to be frugal and responsible. And we see it here in the pandemic season, also articulating a much more protective and conservative mindset to what it means to have a relationship with your money or a financial institution. the optimism that comes with youth and the vibrancy of like, the world is brighter and I'm out to, do everything and travel the world and change the planet, it has shrunk significantly, which is scary. So anyone here that has an influence in the youth segment, or your target may be a youth target, it's important to rekindle that purpose, Janice, which kind of goes back to some of the data we saw in the last presentation, but this now aggravated by the financial and economic context, where our younger generations who are so bright and dreamy and looking at the glass half full are losing some of that, momentum and je ne sais quoi that we know the young people have. So we got to revive that somehow. And look at the millennials in wanting to solve problems. So maybe they were already struggling. Maybe some of those are the younger couples that were hoping to buy their first house this year, or getting married, or had their first baby, and here we are, boom, pandemic hits. A lot bigger, actually the most proportion of soul of the orange portion is we are seeing it amongst millennials. So there is something there for showing up as a partner to help, to relieve some of the burdens. I know this sounds super tactical, but many of you in the banking industry have delayed payments. There's been insurance companies that have said, don't worry about our premiums in this month. We got you. That's the kind of stuff that belongs in that solving portion. So big chunk of that is expected by the millennial segment, which is very important to many organizations.
So there's such a disparity between the millennials, the orange here in Solve, versus the Gen Z. What do you attribute that to?
I think it's a different living condition, right? Like, so the Gen Zs, the little bit that maybe they had is, there are a lot of them, of course, are still living with their parents. Relationship with banking may be more of a transaction still, while millennials are adults. We gotta retrain our brains in thinking that millennials are kids. They're not. There are young adults that are buying homes and having their first or second baby. Right. So if this pandemic is hitting you and you're a young couple, a middle-class young couple, this is very scary. So I bet that's why a lot of it is coming up in this way. So lots of learnings. I know I'm going to go backwards because it's good to kind of go down memory lane. Ethnic segment, a lot of protective, functional in the African-American segment. Women losing the momentum and optimism that was already getting us behind anyway on savings and retirement. So that's very concerning to me as a woman personally. And then the younger generations also, how can we help millennials that maybe all of their dreams and plans for this year have been squashed? Maybe those are the ones losing jobs as well, with the new baby at home, etc. And also that optimism and that bright future that our young people, we need them. We need that energy in society, has also been impacted greatly. And ironically, they've kicked in this uber conservative mindset of protecting whatever little bit they may have. Yeah. And actually, we're going into kind of like a summary slide, and I would love to hear from participants and see if we can answer some questions. But in a nutshell, and this is the power of big data at work, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Before the COVID-19 crisis, there were gaps that already existed in the wealth gaps and earning gaps and saving gaps. And they're getting even worse and more aggravated in this season of COVID-19, because those very segments that were impacted before now are the ones that are reporting more job loss, etc. So why do we need to care about this? As I said, not only for your own customers or workforce, but this is the future of the American customer, shopper, workforce, and population, if you remember those growth numbers. So we should all worry about this, because no recovery will happen without enabling the recovery for the segments that are driving all the growth. That is the lesson number one right there. What can we do in terms of disparity? So social justice, so to speak, or equity is not just a policing issue or an HR dilemma. It also has to do with how we're enabling products and services that help fill these disparities. Now, the second thing is the service expectations. Janice, you were mentioning some of that. You picked it up throughout the presentation. People want an institution to advocate for them, help them, give me a little bit of a break in this time. And I know a lot of you have done that in your own organizations, but it's not the same level or expectation across segments. And we need to know those nuances to be relevant, right? So personalization matters, not just in features and benefits of what you do, but in how you deliver that and how you interact. Which kind of goes to number three. Janice, you mentioned a bit of this. The need for empathy is king. Inclusion is not a program, it's a mindset. And that starts with your people and the way we behave. And you don't have to know all the answers and say the right things. I know a lot of people are afraid of that these days. It's about just acknowledging that there are differences and learning through them. So your talent, your professionals, your vendors will give you an edge if they reflect the communities that you serve, obviously. And last but not least, people organically, as you see, this protective, saving, kind of like the nest egg, protecting it, mama bear kicks in. If that's what's happening, that means that spending dynamics will change, and spending, as you all know, those economists or financial folks in the call, it's a huge lever to what moves GDP, consumer spending. So if this season is hitting the wallets of our most biggest, fastest growing consumer segments, and they're realizing, you know what, I need to deprioritize. Maybe I don't need that gym membership anyway, because look what happened the last 3 months. I'll just keep doing my Peloton at home and stop paying, you know, the expensive gym. You know, monies, the activities, the stuff that you buy. There's already plenty of data from retailers and the Amazons of the world that are showing that people are indeed becoming more frugal. I'm even seeing it in my own household. It's like, I don't need that stuff anymore. And that impacts the greater economic levers that move our GDP and consumer spending. So we got to think about all of that. I know this was a mouthful. I think it's a good time, Janice, to maybe take some questions.
There is a mind shift. You know, I've heard a number of people say, you know, look, I look in my closet and I don't need all those clothes. Or, you know, I shop online and I realize I don't need as much as I have. And, you know, so I think we're all being much more conservative, and I think we're also being much more philanthropic as well, because we see there's so much pain going on, right? With the small business owners, the restaurants, the closing, and the stores, the small business owners. It's really a very sad state that we're in right now. So what you've talked to us today about in terms of the financial concerns of people are very, very real. So one question we have, which I think is a very important one, is given your analysis, and yours is unbiased, you know, because these are just chat rooms and people are just out there talking and you're picking up all this information. Given your analysis, who do the various segments trust to help them with their financial advice? Banks, employers, community organizations, investment firms? Do we have any data on that?
That is and I know Dr. Thurman Lopez, who, by the way, shameless plug, he, in my humble opinion, is one of the leading authorities in public health in this country, by the way. So I'm so happy to see him here. So Esteban, it's a loaded question because it's not one size fits all, meaning it's not one answer for all. The Hispanic community does respect authority and experts significantly. It's kind of like ingrained in a conservative mindset that comes with Latinos that respect elders, the teacher, the priest, the doctor. So it's not so much about what color that expert looks like, but how he or she is engaging me. I'll give you a real life example, and we have data on that on Hispanics and finances. Most people would want their financial expert to get right to the point. Explain to me what you do, what services you offer. Let's talk about my plans for the future and my tolerance levels. No. The Hispanic expects this person to take the time to ask me about my daughter, where she goes to school, where you went on vacation last week, and you get into the details of the services probably on your second or third meeting.
Interesting.
So it's not so much about let's get right into the business, but show me that you care to get to know me. Even if that person on the other end is a female, white, blonde, black, brown, it doesn't matter. You're an authority. You are the expert. I believe that. But show me that you care to get to know me. While that to other cultures is annoying. Like, don't get into my business. Let's talk about business. So sometimes it's not so much the who, but the how. However, in the African American community, also in financial services, if that person on the other end looks like me and can demonstrate, look how I, as a Black female or male, have been able to take my kids to college, buy 2 homes, be successful, I opened a business. It's almost like you're showing me through you that it can be done. Then that creates a different bond. So it depends. It's not the same. And when it comes to women, we have seen it doesn't have to be woman to woman. It could be a very, expert, guy advisor, but he probably needs to ask different questions because we are thinking about not just how you're taking care of your close-knit group, but you're thinking about your mom, your niece that you want to sponsor to go to college. And it's like a bigger circle of financial impact that women tend to have and care for as a caregiver for a broader community of family members. So I know that's a big, long answer to your question, Esteban, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. Sometimes it's the how more so than the who. But if that who looks like me, it's even better.
So from some of the work you've done and the conversations, that you've garnered from your Culturintel and all these conversations, do you see and hear that some organizations are doing their marketing better than others? Mm-hmm. I mean, part of this is, how are businesses reaching out to that consumer? And I know I've been with, banks in the past, my prior career. We always had the women's network. We tried to, really capture the women's groups, and we didn't always do such a good job. Yeah. I still don't think we're doing such a great job at that. But are there some that you hear that are doing it better than others, or are there ways to do it better than ways?
I don't want to run the risk of calling out some company names that they may be in this.
No, you don't need to do that. I wouldn't do that either. No.
But I think there's different things. First of all, your investment, your marketing investment should reflect the size of the opportunity. So how much of whether it is your advertising dollars or digital marketing efforts are hyper targeting women, Hispanic, Black, Asian. I mean, you cannot be doing wealth management in South Florida without it being a Hispanic strategy, for example, or in San Francisco without it being an Asian American strategy, or in Atlanta, Georgia, with the wealthiest segment being the Black community. So you have to be relevant. So if your dollar spend and that personalization and messaging is not reflecting that chart that I showed you of the shifting demographics, there's something wrong with that picture. Because long gone are the days when you blast one giant campaign that goes into every television network and people kind of go, oh, that was good, and that's it. People are expecting personalization because social networks and digital spoiled us rotten, where you see in your wall what you care to see. So if your plans are not taking into consideration mindset and culture, they're probably too generic and therefore inefficient. So that's a good lever to maybe.
I can remember when I was at an organization when we would advertise in different countries, mm-hmm. We could make mistakes with a word because the word was interpreted differently in a different country, so you have to be really attuned to those cultural differences in countries and with different groups, right? So it does make sense to have in any organization the groups that you're trying to attract, right? Whether it be financial advice or whatever you're trying to reach out to that consumer. And here it's in the financial area, that there are people who understand the community that you're trying to attract. And I think that's a lot of what, you're saying here in your, the information that you provided.
That's exactly right. And I am curious if anyone else, I know we have a number of attendees here. If you have any other questions or thoughts, I really want us to kind of getting ahead of our next session, Janice, realize that inclusion is a business decision. And what we're trying to share today is that without that understanding of mindset at the personal level, we may be missing out on the clues and things we need to really activate economic recovery in this country, for example.
Well, that will be our next webinar with you, is talking about how do we really reach out to all communities, all groups across the country in a productive way, right? And you have some, do you want to give us a little teaser on, I know you've done some work on this for the next webinar that we'll do, in terms of what's a bit of your sentiment meter saying? Because you've been out there already, you've got a little bit of a sense of what's being said. You want to give us a little hint?
Yes, so shameless plug, and maybe we close with this PSA, and hopefully you guys join us next time. But using our big data tool, we've been mining how Americans or people are responding or evaluating corporate response to Black Lives Matter. Because as many of you are probably watching in the news, every corporation and CEO is putting out a perfectly crafted statement. There are posts on social media, beautiful videos, all of this stuff. And one wonders, does that even work? Is that resonating with everyday people, not just us talking to ourselves in a D&I echo chamber, right? And our analysis shows that overall, America is responding 57% in a negative or neutral way towards it. And there's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of accountability. Across segments, it plays out a little bit different. Ironically, and I guess this is good news, the Black community is the one showing the most positive response to how corporations are at least saying something. But it's still not like it's an 80-20. It is almost like a 50-50. Okay, yay, thanks for doing this. And the other half are like, you're kind of trying too hard. Where were you 5 months ago? So we'll share some of the specifics on that, Janice, like what's driving that difference. So hopefully we equip the attendees with what not to do. I know a lot of people are asking what to do, but the data is showing actually what not to do. And it's going to be a lot of fun to share. We're crunching the final numbers, but that's a bit of the tease of what we
So
have.
it's a stay tuned, right, to the next webinar.
Have to come back like a good movie.
Because I listen to, I'm a news junkie, so I listen to the news every day, and I see, so one CEO donates $120 million to, colleges that graduate people of color, and another one is putting it into the communities in which that bank operates. And so it's very, magnanimous, and it's very generous. But I hear what you're saying. There's a skepticism, isn't there? Is this sustainable? Yeah. Will they really continue to do this? Because we can go back 50 years to the war on poverty, and where are we today? So people are loss of income, loss of jobs, over 20 million jobs gone. So they're looking at, is this sustainable? Will it stick? Will corporate America really be there? Will there be the public-private partnerships going forward that will help me in my community? Because you have to do it locally, don't you? It's not at the necessarily, you need some at the federal level, but every community needs to have that commitment. And so it all sounds good, but people are a little skeptical. So there's more to come from Lili Gil Valetta, strategic partner with the Ellig Group and co-founder and CEO of Culturintel. Lili, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janice. Always a pleasure to have thought-provoking conversations with you.
Yes, and your webinar, the past one, is on our website, and your slides from that webinar are on the website. Great. And then we will send out this information to the participants. So, Lili, just keep gathering all of that information because it's, totally unbiased and it really reflects what the Voice of America is saying. And maybe you'll come on and predict the election later on.
Well, yes, we are. So 2016 we did, and a lot of people were puzzled by, in July, we started seeing the pickup for today, President Trump. So we'll see. We don't do political work, but we run the data just for fun. So we'll make sure you guys have it. And thank you, everyone. I'm looking at all the names. Thank you for taking the time. I see, Marianne, Melanie, Monica, Nadine, Suzanne. I mean, all of you, this really matters. And please spread the word because I think we need inclusion in our data and financial decisions more than ever. So appreciate it.
So Lili, if I had my way, I would have everybody make sure that they hire you to make
sure that yes, follow Janice's advice.
So that we have a more inclusive, more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce throughout the country. And I think that everybody's mind is in the right place. I think their hearts are as well, but you can help them get there, and I will be right alongside of you to help make it happen. So thank you again. We will continue. Thank you to the audience for being with us today. More webinars to come, and please visit our website to see the ones that have already happened. Lili Gil Valetta, thank you so much for being my friend and my strategic partner.
Thank you. Thanks,
Stay
Jen.
safe, stay well to everybody. Thank you.
Bye.